Hey guys, welcome back. Joe Brunsman, insurance broker to the stars. Today we're going to be talking about something that is not particularly exciting, but it is very, very crucial for your business. Could save you hundreds of thousands of dollars. So today we're going to be talking about employment practices liability insurance, here on out known as EPLI. So let's go ahead and jump on into it. All right, brief background because there's a pretty solid misunderstanding here. These are some of the other policies you may be carrying. And if you look in there, it has nothing to do with allegations of sexual harassment, discrimination, et cetera, et cetera. Your Tech E&O policy, think of that as client brings a claim, or AKA a lawsuit against you because of some alleged error or omission. May also be coverage in there on the cyber side. Commercial general liability / business owner's policy, also known as a CGL or a BOP. Think of that more as like property damage. Now, you may have a small endorsement on there for employment practices claims, but generally it's not going to be high enough. That's been the trend really for like, say, the last 5-10 years at this point. And I'm going to show you why that is a little bit later on. You may also have a workers' compensation policy. Think of that as employee gets injured on the job. Now, what do all of these policies generally have in common? You're going to see the following: insured versus insured exclusion. That's pretty much on every policy out there. What does that mean? That means if an employee sues another employee, that's not covered under your policy. That means if an employee sues your business for some allegation of sexual harassment or discrimination, also probably not covered under any of those policies, or if it is, it's a very small sublimit, which means you may end up paying out of pocket a very sizable expense there, which you probably don't want to do. So why even have employment practices insurance? Why have EPLI? Maybe you're thinking to yourself, hey, we have our employee handbook reviewed once a year. We have an HR attorney who is on retainer. We got all of this locked down. Well, let's say you just have a meritless claim that crossed your desk. Someone got fired and now they're fishing for money and they're making up all of these allegations. Well, even if you get that dismissed, according to this law firm, you're still looking at about 10 to 15 grand there. Now, that's if you have all your ducks in a row and it's a meritless claim. What if you don't have your handbook reviewed once a year by an attorney? What if you don't even have an employee handbook? What if you've never looked into the employment laws relevant to your state and your particular circumstances? How much is that going to cost you? Well, according to this law firm here, 10 to 50 grand. That's $10,000 to $50,000 or more just for a quick settlement so you can get back to life as normal. Now, one of the things you have to understand here is a lot of these employment practices claims, they come from attorneys who are essentially saying like, hey, we're not going to charge you for our services, Mr. or Mrs. Claimant. What we're going to do here is we work for free, and then once you get some award that's given to you, we get some percentage of that. So with that, essentially people can bring claims against you effectively for free as far as they're concerned. Now, there are some limitations on the attorney side, which I don't want to get into there, but suffice to say there are plenty of very advantageous attorneys out there who are more than willing to bring these claims even if it's on very, very shaky ground. And of course, some of these claims may absolutely be legitimate. You may have an employee out there who is actually sexually harassing another employee or sexually harassing, say, the front desk person at one of your client's offices, and then you're going to have a problem. So EPLI insurance, I would really say, please look into this. It could really save your business. Now, what does it actually cover? Now, obviously, every policy is going to be different, but very broadly speaking, claims, expenses, and damages. What does that mean? Claims, expenses, the cost of your attorney fees as a business. Damages, the damages awarded to the plaintiff who brought the claim, aka the payout or the settlement that you end up giving them. But it's for very specific things, and this is what you have to look at inside of that EPLI policy. Now, think of this as kind of like a good way to kind of wrap your head around all the things probably not covered on the other policies we already discussed. Sexual harassment, hostile working environment, wrongful discharge. So that could be with some sort of merger and acquisition, termination of that employee. If you're downsizing, or what's the new speak these days? Right sizing, I think, is the new PC term. Some type of discrimination. So there's tons of protected classes here, but that could be gender discrimination, racial discrimination, religion, nationality, age, pregnancy, medical, mental conditions. There's all types of protected classes there where someone can bring a claim against your business, and an EPLI policy would be your first line of defense there. Now, with that, you have to understand it's just not as simple anymore in many states as, hey, you know what? This guy was doing a terrible job. We talked to him about it a million times. Eventually we fired him. Well, what's that plaintiff's attorney going to say? What documentation do you have actually in place? Can you go back and show me all of the counseling statements where you are alleging that you counsel this person, but if there's no written documentation there, now you get a problem. And that's just another reason why I think EPLI insurance is important, because one of the things you can do on that potential claim side is if you have the right policy, you may be able to contact that insurer and say, hey, this is what I'm trying to do, right? We have this employee. They're just not up to snuff. They keep making mistakes. They're costing me money. They're not diligent enough. They just can't handle the job that I hired them for. I need to terminate them. Well, just make sure you got to check those boxes first. And you're talking with a qualified attorney so they can advise you and say, okay, well, if you're going to do this in this jurisdiction, here's some things you want to have in place first. So maybe you have to hold off on firing that person for, say, a couple months. So you have all the paperwork lined up as appropriate, really to make that defense much stronger for your business. Otherwise, you could just end up paying out a claim just to get it away from you. And as shown before, 50 grand or more, that's a pretty big nugget to swallow there. Workplace defamation, humiliation, maybe that constant ribbing back and forth with the employees, maybe somebody deep down, they're just like boiling with rage when that happens and they could bring a claim against you. Invasion of privacy. Now we're talking about BYOD, employee monitoring software, very big deal in the common age. Deprivation of career opportunities. So potentially failure to promote, failure to even hire somebody. So we've actually dealt with an employment practices claim where it was a phone interview. They had no idea what this person looked like. And essentially he claimed racial discrimination on a phone interview, not like a Zoom interview, a phone interview, claimed racial discrimination. That had to be defended, got expensive. It was, I believe, in Washington, D.C. Immigration claims, you could be looking at status claims. Could be another issue there. Also some wage and hour issues. So now who may actually be covered under this policy? Well, obviously the owners. So if an employee brings a claim against the ownership, which is probably who's watching this video, that could come into play. Leased workers, also important. Contract workers, seasonal workers, merged or acquired entities, heirs, executors, administrators, legal representatives. I'm not going to get too far into that, but situationally could be very important there. So just kind of something to keep in mind. Excuse me. Now, types of claims. First-party claims, what does that really mean? Okay, an employee brings a claim against your business for alleging, let's say, wrongful termination. So in all of this context, first party is going to be your business. Third party is going to be, say, clients, vendors, other random people. Second party, little fun insurance fact for you, is actually the insurance company. So in this case, if you had coverage for first party claims, employee brings a claim against you. Hopefully you have the appropriate policy. Policy responds as the language dictates. Now, what about a third-party claim? How would that even arise, and where does this type of coverage come from? Now, I will say you have to make sure if you want third-party coverage that you look for that inside your policy and you work with a qualified and knowledgeable legal broker or legal representative. So what could be a third-party claim? Let's say a receptionist at one of your clients. They're alleging that your employees who are going on site there are sexually harassing her, or there's some type of discrimination there. So now that reception at the business, they're going to bring a lawsuit against your business because they're now uncomfortable every time one of your employees walks in the door. Well, that could be something that an EPLI policy might cover. Next, let's talk about some common exclusions here, things you need to be aware of. Pretty much all the other stuff, all the other insurance policies may be carrying, those are a lot of common exclusions. So workers' compensation, disability benefits, unemployment compensation. Then it gets more technical. We started getting into ERISA, so that could be fiduciary liability. There's obviously insurance specifically for that. NLRA of 1938, the FLSA, Fair Labor Standards Act, owner versus employee or another owner. So the idea here is this is really to provide coverage for the business and your employees. If you're an owner and you're trying to bring some type of claim for sexual harassment or sexual discrimination, Generally, EPLI policies don't cover that because in that case, you would just terminate that person. All right, moving on here. Let's talk about limit adequacy real briefly. So this is from, I believe, Thomson Reuters Jury Trends and Statistics. You can see here when you're thinking about, okay, how much EPLI insurance do I actually need? These are award means. Keep that in mind. So aka averages, so to speak. Sorry, statisticians. I know there's a distinction there. But overall discrimination, 192,000, retaliation, 147 grand, whistleblowers, over $250,000, wrongful termination, 140 grand, employment cases overall, about 160 grand. So suffice to say that little, say, $10,000 sublimit that may be on your BOP somewhere, or if you have no insurance at all, not going to cut it here. Probably not something you just want to stroke a check for. All right, some industries just have bigger risks. Generally, the bigger payouts are to employees that are in high compensation industries. So think like technology, banking, finance. People that are highly compensated can bring very, very large claims against your business. So looking at that, this is percentages and award ranges. So you'll see about 71 percentages up to $250,000. Once you really kind of like start digging into it, I mean, honestly, work with an experienced broker, talk to legal counsel if you need to, but if you don't have $1 million of insurance, you're probably playing a rough game here. So, with that, $1 million of insurance, pretty easy to get. If you're a bigger organization, if you're worried about class action claims, then you may want to increase that limit of insurance. But you need to talk to an insurance broker and legal counsel about that. All right, let's talk about, glitch in the matrix. Let's talk about some quick basic risk reduction measures here. Now, obviously you want to work with an HR professional and or a qualified attorney to do the following. I am just an insurance guy. Yes, I've written about this topic. It's been published, but employment law is not particularly interesting or fascinating to me, although the claims are absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely insane. So we had an employment claim where a business, they found 2 people smoking weed in the bathroom during the Christmas holiday party. They got fired on the spot. Both of those women then went forward and brought a claim against the business, an employment practices claim for wrongful termination, discrimination, et cetera, et cetera. I think that case alone, and by the way, it was illegal in the state at the time. I think that case alone ended up costing something like $130,000 or so between all the attorney's fees and the settlements, et cetera, et cetera. Also keep in mind too that, some areas are just very pro-employee and very anti-employer. A lot of that's social, a lot of it may be politically based. But with that, you just have to understand that even if you did absolutely nothing wrong, it doesn't mean you can't get sued. It doesn't mean that you can't lose. So please, protect your business as appropriate. First thing that's going to be your line of defense, employee handbook. Make sure you have it updated at least once a year, reviewed by an attorney who is knowledgeable in this area. Second, look into at-will employment. What does at-will employment mean? Essentially, you can terminate someone at any time with, I believe, the big exception of discrimination, but check me on that. Look into any of those confidentiality or non-compete agreements. It's not as straightforward as it thinks. It's not as easy as just a Google search. I had a whole class getting my master's in law actually dealing with like non-competes, confidentiality agreements. It's not as straightforward as you think. There's a lot of wiggle room on both sides there. Clearly define some sort of avenue for complaints. Make sure that's documented appropriately. That will definitely help you out there. Check the legality of any of your employment classifications. So that could be contract workers, that could be full-time workers, that could be salaried workers. Big case was in the news recently, dealt with Uber, where now Uber, I guess they now are employees, will be judged as employees and are not necessarily independent contractors. Those can be big dollar claims there as well. Check the legality of any of your vacation and your wage policies. Once again, a lot of this law is really specific to your locality. So you need to make sure that you're working with that attorney who knows what they're doing, or you really could get burned here. And that's what makes employment law really kind of frustrating, because it's just very granular down to the tiniest little level on what you can do, what you can't do, and then you cross jurisdictions and it turns into a mess. And that's why it really is a great place to talk to an attorney. And there's probably a bunch of other things you could be doing there. But just make sure that you have your hands wrapped around this stuff, because the last thing I want to see is one of you guys ends up calling me and you're like, Joe, dude, I got this problem. I got this employee. They're suing me now. I've only got to say this like tiny little sublimit, or I have no insurance for this. Like, who do I talk to? What do I do? Those are the types of calls I don't like getting. So make sure you are protecting yourself as appropriate. All right, moving on here to much more fun topics. This is damage control, cyber insurance compliance, about 500 pages of cyber insurance and compliance knowledge, everything you ever wanted to know or not know. That is where you can download it for free. And with that, stay safe.